everybody, and welcome to another episode of Insufficient Friends. I'm Kevin. She's Nikki.
Hi.
So, Nick.
Yeah.
So, Nick, how's it going? It's been a couple weeks since we recorded one of these because we had things to do.
Yeah.
But
It's been good.
Everything's good?
Not much is going on. You know, our house is being built, work. The most important thing I had was, Kevin, your birthday was recently.
Yes.
So happy late birth. I said happy birthday to you over text, but happy late podcast birthday celebration.
Thank you. And thank you to everybody who sent me a text or posted on Facebook or whatever. You know, that's always nice to hear those type of things. So,
Kevin's birthday.
Woo! Yeah, I'm now old enough to be the president. That's weird. I don't know.
35?
35, yep.
Wow, that's a wow moment.
What is this?
W?
What is this?
Oh, W. Wow.
Okay.
All right. I'm done.
If you say
I'm
so.
leaving.
I don't have a clue. Anyway, but
happy birthday.
Thank you very much.
Congrats, Mr. President.
Yeah. But everything's been going good. How's the house? How's all that going with the construction and everything? Is it going pretty well?
It's a really interesting process. I really enjoy it because I like planning things naturally, and figuring out details. So the concrete for the basement has been poured, like the frame of the wall,
the foundation,
and then they just poured like the actual walls today. I don't know. It's kind of hard to describe because there's no like floor yet. It's just the walls.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't know. Anyways, it's fun to look at.
It's interesting. Because I grew up. My dad, not obviously, but my dad owns a construction company, so I grew up watching that all the time. So yeah, I know what you're talking about exactly.
Okay, good, because I don't.
Well, that's fine. That's fine.
It's more like my part comes into play when we pick all the interior things, like when the builder sends me to the stone yard to pick out like that. So that is more, my jam than figuring out like the layout. Casey, we like split responsibilities. So he like designed like the flow of everything. Like here's how the levels should lay out and here's how the room should flow.
Okay.
And I am like
you're the interior designer.
Yeah, basically. And like, don't forget, we need to add, this for the dogs, this for the laundry room, like things like that. And then figuring out the design and so it's been fun.
Good.
It's just exciting knowing that, this is like a new chapter for us almost.
Yeah.
Almost there.
That's awesome. I haven't really done much. On my birthday, my dad was up here for a couple days around that, and we did go to a couple museums in Kansas City, and we'll talk about one of them later because you also went to the exhibit, the Disney 100 exhibit in Kansas City, which is one of the things that we went to, and we'll talk about that after we get through our first part here. But before we get to that, we got shout outs. I have two. They're both from the same person.
Yay.
Dan, again, thank you for commenting. We've got two different ones from two different episodes. So one was on the Momo episode, the Missouri Monster, and he said it was about you. This was about your camera falling. And he said, was so glad it was the camera that fell because I thought Nikki fell out of her chair, LOL.
I would also not put that past me.
I wouldn't either, but I can understand.
That's good
because it just kind of fell, and then there was nothingness for a few seconds. So.
I was like mid sentence, and I just watched it fall. But that's funny. That's a funny comment. I like that.
And then on the Broken by Reality TV, on the reality TV episode that we did, he said it's refreshing to see Kev squirm about a topic he'd rather avoid. So.
Yes, I feel the same.
which is also understandable because that was not something that I enjoyed at all. But it was fun. But thanks, Dan, for the comments. And just anybody who wants to a shout out, just leave a comment. We'll say
Yeah,
hi.
for sure.
We always like to well, I don't know if engage is the right way to say it. Probably engage. Yeah, I don't know, something like that. We always like to hear from you guys.
Yeah.
So, well, what about
Yes.
you? Did you have any? Is there anything that we got on Instagram or anything like that over the last couple of weeks?
We did not get
anything
Okay.
on Instagram. We got likes from our normal peeps,
Yeah.
Paulette, Nick,
Okay.
Kira. But I did want to do a quick shout out. So the reason I got to go to the Disney 100 exhibit
Mm-hmm.
is because of Aunt Cindy and Uncle Mike. So they had extra tickets.
Oh.
We were their backup plan. Their other friends got COVID, unfortunately.
Oh, that's not
But
fun.
anyways, we still got to go. So now I have, we get to talk about it today.
Yeah.
So thank you, Aunt Cindy and Uncle Mike.
Yes,
because now we get to talk about it. Because I got to go.
Yeah, so we'll get to that later. But first, we decided to talk about Chernobyl. And this is a random topic from talking about Disney. So we're going to start with this. Yeah. But so a couple of years ago, HBO came out with a miniseries, a docuseries on the disaster. And Nikki didn't really know what had happened. So I told her she should watch it because it is very interesting if you don't know.
Yes.
If you've never seen or ever learned anything about it or anything about what happened, it is a very interesting disaster.
It was. Yeah. Because obviously, like, I know of Chernobyl. I knew it was a nuclear
disaster, but beyond that, nothing. And this was fascinating. The only issue I had with the show is that, usually when we, recommend something to each other to watch or are watching something for the podcast, I will watch it at night because that's usually the time I have.
Okay.
I had to stop watching this at night and watch it on all in one Sunday afternoon during the day because it gave me so much anxiety. It's so well done.
It's extremely well
done. And it's so, you feel like you're there. It was just my heartbeat was going so fast. I was I think I need to stop watching this.
Yeah.
So I had to watch it on a really sunny day and binge it all at once and get it done. But it was really good.
There's a couple, if I remember correctly, because I didn't rewatch it, but I watched it soon after it came out a year or so ago. And I know I've watched different stuff on Chernobyl over the years too. But if I remember correctly, at the end, they showed images that match between the show and actual images from the disaster cleanup and things like that to kind of show you how accurate they tried to be with the telling of the story.
Yes, and they showed some different facts that I'll go through towards the end of our talk about Chernobyl too.
Yeah, it was very interesting.
Yeah. So, Nick, do you want to start us off where? So a lot of people probably don't know where it is or what it was, but do you want to start us off with that?
Yeah, absolutely.
I didn't know where it was either. So the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, it's actually in Pripyat, which all these words I'm guarantee I'm going to say wrong.
No, that's correct.
Even the names of some of these countries that were in the Soviet Union, I guarantee I'm saying the name of the country wrong.
Oh, that's possible.
But
Pripyat is correct. Pripyat is correct.
Okay. So Pripyat in northern Ukraine. So I always thought this was in what is now modern day Russia, but no, it was in northern Ukraine near the Belarus border.
Yeah.
And it was part of the Soviet Union then. So another thing I had to look up because I didn't know, and obviously this plays a big part in the politics of everything in the show, and we're not going to get too far into the politics, but just I didn't even know what the Soviet Union consisted of. I knew of it. I knew Gorbachev and the wall and the basics. I didn't know that there were what is now 15 different countries.
Yeah.
Made up all of it. That was wild to me.
It was kind of like a communist version of what the European Union is now. Is a great way to think about it.
Crazy. Yeah. Wild. So, obviously Ukraine was part of that, and Belarus. So that was interesting. Just doing that research because I didn't even know where it was.
And so I also found out that Chernobyl is one of only 2 nuclear accidents rated at like the maximum severity on the international nuclear scale. The other one, Fukushima, I don't even remember this happening. That was in 2011.
I remember that happening. Yep. The tsunami that hit Japan and basically flooded the reactors and caused them to explode. Yes, I do remember that happening.
Yeah, which is wild. I don't remember. I must have been too young. I was like 13 at the time.
So I probably was not paying attention to sense. International events.
Yeah. That's another disaster that was crazy, because if you find videos, it's amazing just to watch the water just come into, because it's a tsunami, which if you don't know what that is, it's a massive wave basically that just destroys everything in its path, and it is insane to watch the videos of it just all of a sudden just coming into land and like picking up cars and destroying buildings. It's crazy. But yes, that is the other highest level. There's been other nuclear accidents. 3 Mile Island is the worst one, arguably the worst one in the U.S. that's ever happened. And it was a low compared to these. It was almost nothing. Lower. So
yeah, just wild. So that's where
Chernobyl is, what the accident was, but as far as the timeline and what actually happened, so the show was just fascinating how they went through everything. So run us through like what actually happened and what went wrong in the timeline of it all.
So the incident happened on April 26th of 1986. And some people will say this is like the start and one of the issues that kind of helped push the Soviet Union to collapse because
I saw that too.
It collapsed in 91, I want to say, is when it
like 91
when it ended and turned to Russia. Go ahead.
And Mikhail Gorbachev said in 2006, so way later, in 2006, he said Chernobyl was part of the downfall
of the Soviet Union. Yeah. So that was like confirmed by him. He's like, yep, that was part of it.
Yeah. So
wild.
The issue started a day before, basically, on the 25th. They started to hear it was supposed to be a safety test. That's what the whole Chernobyl incident, what happened and what they were doing at the time. So they had disabled a bunch of things. They had started reducing power out of the reactor, which, it was part of a routine shutdown for maintenance. So it was gonna happen anyway. There was some issues with timing and things that happened. So what was supposed to happen in one shift got pushed into another shift with people that didn't really know what was going on and didn't have as much experience as the main operators. So they struggled with the power levels going up and down for several hours. Because they were trying to get this test going. They were having issues with the power going up and down on a regular basis. And at 1:23 in the morning, there was a power surge, and within a few seconds, and remember, when I'm talking about this, let's just say that I am not a science educator, I'm not a nuclear physicist. If you want to watch something on that, I'll recommend Kyle Hill, because he does a lot better. He's a YouTuber he talks about... he's an engineer. He talks about this kind of stuff a lot, and it's really interesting to hear him talk about it. But within like a few seconds, they decided to scram. They scrammed the reactor, which means they shut it down. And what that happens is it pushes all of the control rods, which are meant to control the reaction going on, pushes all them down into the reactor to hopefully stop it from melting down. Well, there was a problem with those, with that, in that instance, and it caused an explosion which shot the 100-ton roof off of the reactor. So it was such a large explosion, it blew the 100-ton roof off the reactor and then just started... So now you have an open reactor, doesn't have any containment, that is on fire and burning and just releasing ash and smoke and things into the air. So releasing radiation into the air. Firefighters showed up a few minutes later, didn't know what was going on. So a lot of them ended up getting cancer and having high levels of radiation poisoning. A lot of the people in the town ended up having the same issue because, you know, they didn't know what was going on. And it was Russia tried to kind of hide it for a couple days until they actually started evacuating the 100,000+ people out of this town. And it wasn't until 2 days after it happened that Sweden actually detected higher levels of radiation than they realized were supposed to be. That's when the world actually started to find out, because Russia didn't say or the Soviet Union didn't say anything to anybody. They tried to hide it, and then it wasn't until
they wanted to maintain
the whole reason why this is the recurring theme is the Soviet Union wanted to maintain that they were the most powerful and the furthest advanced in this technology. So all of these issues, they had like cheap equipment, and everything was like, basically the recurring theme is they refuse to update it, but they maintain like the party line that everything is great, everything is perfect, no updates are needed. But in reality, it very much did need fixing for a lot of issues.
Yeah. So they started working on cleanup process. After all this happens, they slowly start, working on cleanup. They tried robots. Robots couldn't handle the radiation. They even got robots from other countries that were supposed to handle more. They couldn't handle the radiation. They would break down. So they started sending people out in little, like, short 30, 45-second shifts to push the radioactive material the graphite back into the reactor. After a couple weeks, their fire in the core burned itself out. While this is happening to all the people that lived in Pripyat, the 100,000+ people that lived there, were just told this was going to take a couple days. You still can't live there. Like, it's still, there's still a 30 kilometer, I think, exclusion zone around the reactor, which is, you have to have special permissions to go in. You can't, like, it's not a livable area. Yeah. Well, it's not a safe area to be in. I mean, you can go in there. There's people that go in there. Again, like I said, Kyle Hill has gone in there, and he took a tour of it and went inside the building next to the sarcophagus, which the sarcophagus was a giant, they basically just poured a bunch of concrete and sand into the thing to cover it up. And then eventually they, just a few years ago, they finished building the safer containment, which is like a big domed building that was constructed next to it and rolled over it to kind of protect it for the next, I think it's 100 years. And that was just finished, I think just not maybe less than 10 years ago, I believe, and rolled rolled into place. So yeah, it was I mean, obviously it was a disaster, but it was terrible. Like, it was terrible.
It's just wild how,
because of the politics of everything, it went from, no, you're safe, you're fine, it'll be just a couple days, to literally, like, not only are you evacuated, they told people, like, outside of the exclusion zone, but in like another zone around, like, don't eat vegetables, don't eat or don't drink milk from cows. It was like, it went from 0 to not 100. It went from like 0 to 1,000,000, like so quick.
Yeah.
As soon as like the world got a hold of, because the other country was like, why are we detecting all this radiation? You said it was, a contained thing.
Yeah.
It just went so crazy. And so that was probably the most wild thing to me, because I always knew it was a nuclear disaster, but I didn't know any of the whys or the hows or the politics of the time or anything. It was just crazy. And like the official death toll released by the Soviet Union, and Russia still maintains this, 31.
Yeah. There was a couple
remains unchanged.
There's a few people that died immediately in the disaster.
Yes. Yeah, and
when
like the
explosion.
firefighters and things.
They included that.
Yeah.
But the actual projected death toll,
it's in the
I mean, it's you
in the
can't
thousands and thousands of people.
Yes.
Yeah.
It ranges between 4,000 to 93,000 depending on who you include. Like if you include the cancer patients, and so it like ranges so drastically, but it's definitely not 31. Like that is just wild to me that official record is still the same.
Yep. It is crazy.
Yeah.
And
it was also, sorry, go ahead.
Well, you talked about, so it was in 2006 that Gorbachev wrote that Chernobyl was possibly the real cause of the collapse of the Soviet Union. And it is insane.
It showed the weakness in the party and
the countries for sure. Another one of the things that was absolutely wild, and I was about to say spoiler alerts as if the show is not like a real event that happened. But so part of it was Valery Legasov, or the main guy, the main like scientist that helped the relief effort.
Yeah.
Or so, the show says. His death by suicide was because he released these tapes and no one was listening to him about how the other reactors and the Soviet Union used the same technology. And so he recorded these tapes, which was just crazy. And no one was listening to him until he died by suicide. And those tapes were circulated throughout the whole scientific community to the point where they couldn't be ignored anymore. And only then did the Soviet Union fix all the other RBMK reactors that had the exact same issue with the, what was it, like AZ5, or I can't remember the actual button, but the fail-safe button, or what was supposed to be a fail-safe.
Yeah. So
that's what it took for them to fix things.
Yeah. I've heard several different stories, and again, I'm not a nuclear physicist or a scientist or a science educator or anything like that, but I've heard about a steam pocket in it that possibly ramped up the conditions in the reactor that had formed that wasn't supposed to. The fact that the control rods were made with a special tip that also caused an issue when a graphite tip, which when it hit that, it caused an even more of an issue. So there's, again, a lot of things that happened. We are just scratching the surface on what happens or what happened. Like I said,
basically, it seemed like the show's conclusion,
at least, which I know they did their own research because they tried to make it very, factual, obviously. And I was even looking at like Reddit after, and people still have different theories as to like some of the whys. But the show concluded, at least based on their research and their production, that the fault it was basically like the overseer guy that was overseeing the safety test at the time. It was equally as much his fault as it was the Soviet Union for not upkeeping or not giving permission to update these technologies and things like that. Like it came from the higher up level as well. So it's like there wasn't like one reason for this. It was like kind of a combination of just a bunch of things.
Yeah.
Is what I gathered from it.
Yeah, and it's and again, there was so much. There's a part, I think a whole episode in there where it talks about a trial for several different people, and the like you said, the main guy who ends up committing suicide is he speaks in it and basically talks about a bunch of it. It's just it's a awful.
It's just wild, like 300,000 people displaced, from their home in that area. And then the last like fact I remember from the end of like the show, and they go through the actual historical facts and pictures and things, childhood cancer rates increased dramatically in Belarus and Ukraine. In both of those, like childhood cancer rates just skyrocketed after. So that's another reason why you don't really know the exact effect of,
because you don't know how many you can correlate them a little bit, but you don't know how many
correlation.
You don't know how many of those kids would have gotten cancer without this happening. You don't know how many, like, if this was how much of this was the cause, and also just figuring out everybody everywhere, how what happened with cancer rates and things like that, and it's just hard to say. So
yeah, it's just wild.
Yeah.
It was a really
good show. I do recommend watching it, just not when you're trying to go to bed, because it will give you anxiety.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's still extremely radioactive in places today. Again, that's why it's encased in concrete and everything else. So,
another thing you sent me
that you made me watch, but it not made me. It was actually good. Like, it was fun to watch.
Yeah,
the Top Gear.
Top Gear thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to tell what that was?
So they did years ago. They did a Top Gear episode where they drove through Ukraine. They did a trip through Ukraine, driving some small hatchback vehicles, and the last place that they went, because Ukraine's a large country. It's not the U.S. or Russia or anything, but it's still a large country. And they made jokes as they're driving from Kyiv all the way up to what they end up learning is Chernobyl. So the challenge that they had to do was they got so much gas in their car, and then they had to drive to Chernobyl. So they're going through this trying to run out of gas as soon as before they make it to the exclusion zone, and then they end up driving into it and driving up and around Chernobyl. And it's just them being comical, because that's what Top Gear mostly was about cars, but a lot of hilarity ensues.
I mean, they were just driving through, and what is it?
The Geiger counter.
Yeah, the Geiger counters. Yeah. They were just like, and I was like, I have so much anxiety for you right now.
Yeah, because
it was going wild.
Yeah, I mean, and it is somewhat dangerous still. There is high levels of radiation in some places. It is. You can go there. You can visit it. There are companies that do trips to the exclusion zone to see it. You can't. You can get somewhat close to the building. I don't think you can go inside. Now, again, like I said, if you want to see more stuff on that, the YouTube channel, I'll link it below. Kyle Hill he did a tour inside the building, and he has a charity that he works with that tries to help the animals in the exclusion zone. And he's done several things with that too. So I recommend the videos that he's done, because he's done a lot of different videos. I mean, he does a lot of different science videos anyway, but he's done several. He's got a whole series on like nuclear accidents and disasters like this one. And he tries, and he's also tried to drop the stigma around nuclear power, because obviously this ups it a lot, but it is it is safer than a lot of people realize, I think. But it's a really good channel to watch if you want some science better than what we're going to give you here for science.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So, what did you have anything else, or were you ready for facts on this? Was that it?
Yeah. Do you want to do Disney or facts?
I think facts, because you've got a Chernobyl fact.
I do have a Chernobyl fact.
I think we'll do facts first, and then I'll let you do a Chernobyl fact, and then I can do a Disney fact, and that can be our transition.
Okay, sounds good. So, there were a couple
interesting things that I found that I actually weren't in the show, because it's more like nowadays. So you kind of mentioned you very much still can go to Chernobyl, but you can still die from radiation from there.
If you're there for a long time, or you go to certain places, yes. Most of the places, though, you're gonna be okay. You can't live there.
So there were a couple,
but
there were a couple spots that they
said if you stood or laid down in that spot for 4 hours. So there were spots high enough that if you were there for 4 hours, prolonged, not moving, in the highest, active spot still, then you would succumb and slowly die from that amount of radiation.
Yeah.
And that was, based on these researchers still going back out there and doing reading levels and things like that. That's what they said, that, 4 hours in the highest spots is like you will die.
Yeah. And if you want something
it's
interesting
crazy
to look up, one of those is called the elephant's foot. It's a photo you can find online. And it was taken, I think a while after the cleanup happened, but basically what it is it's part of the core that melted. It melted through the concrete below the reactor, and it created this giant, just like, mass of radioactive material. And they have watched it for several years to make sure it doesn't burn through another layer, like the bottom of it again. But it is one of the highest places of radiation in the facility still. So, and they call it the elephant's foot because it looks kind of like an elephant's foot. It's just kind of a big blob that sits there.
I figured.
And if
I don't know why else they would give it.
Yeah, and the photos, if you look at them, there's a lot of lines and graininess, which is the radiation having an effect on the camera and the film. So it's very interesting. It's very eerie, but the show is a great watch if you want to learn more about it and what happened. And it's very interesting. It's a very big part of nuclear history. And so it's really good, but
yeah.
So
Disney are we going to transition to Disney now?
You have a Disney fact?
Disney fact. We're going to do a transition because we're going to go into Disney now.
Yeah, we didn't want to end on
a sad Chernobyl note.
So one of the things that I would say a lot of people don't know, unless you're a Disney fan and a Disney nerd like me, you would learn it. We went to the Disney 100 exhibit, or she went at one point, and I went at a different point. I went on my birthday because I wanted to see it, and but anyway, Walt Disney, before he created Mickey Mouse, had another character called Oswald the Lucky Rabbit. And he created this character for Universal Studios, who is a big rival nowadays of Disney, if you're anything about the theme parks or pay attention to anything about theme parks or know anything about theme parks. So Oswald was Disney's first character. He was later Walt decided to there was a conflict between the two, and Walt decided to leave Universal, and they kept the rights to Oswald, and they kept all of Walt's animators that he worked with, basically saying like, yeah, you're not going to get anything. And when you go into the exhibit here, you can see the letter that Walt sent to his brother after this happened, because he had a meeting in, I believe it was New York that he had the meeting in, and then he was going back to California. He was taking the train back to California, or I think it was the train back to California, and he sent his brother a telegram, to brother Roy, who was his partner in the Walt Disney Studios later, and said, "Don't worry, everything's fine. Tell you more when I get home," is basically all it says. It's just a telegram. And while he was on his way home, the story is that he drew the first drawing of Mickey Mouse, and his original name was going to be Mortimer Mouse. You can find hints to that around the Disney parks if you go in there. His wife Lily said that was not a good name, and she recommended Mickey, and that's how the story goes. So yes, Walt Disney worked for Universal, which is interesting. He lost Oswald to Universal. He created Mickey Mouse, and then in the early 2000s, Disney reacquired the rights to Oswald. So Oswald is back in the Disney.
I didn't know that
part
in the Disney catalog. So yeah, that's my fun Disney fact.
Yeah, and that is interesting. I saw that part of the exhibit about that, but I didn't know they had rebought it in previous years.
Yeah, it's like it's one of the first things you see in the room is it talks about Oswald and like his early start with silent films in Kansas City, and live action with a little girl that was in cartoons. One of the first times that had ever been done back in the day. So in the early, I guess it would have been in probably the teens, 19 teens, early 20s. So yeah.
Interesting.
The exhibit.
The Disney exhibit is so cool.
I mean, it was, and I'm not like I don't really know much, the intricacies of Disney and the theme parks and everything like you do. And it was still like, I took a couple pictures of like the Little Mermaid and the Haunted Mansion, and there were some really cool things in there and props. So there's a global circuit that's doing this and a US circuit. I don't remember how long it's in Kansas City, and then it's going to Chicago next.
I believe so. I think it got to Kansas City in May, and it's supposed to leave in November. So it's there for like 6 months or something like that. It started in Philadelphia, so
okay.
But
and
it's
then
going
the global
to
one
was like London,
Munich, and Seoul, I believe, is what it is. But I don't know if it's going anywhere else. I don't know if they'll extend it. Disney 100, the name comes from this. We've now passed it, but 2003 was 100 years of the Walt Disney Company. It was created in 1923 by Walt and his brother Roy. And that's so they've pulled a lot of artifacts out of the archives, out of the Disney archives, and they've put them on display for people to see. And some of the cool things, like she said, that they have in there is if you watch the old like Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty movies, the very opening sequence of them is a storybook that gets opened up and then it shows pictures and things like that. They have those storybooks there, a couple of them. They have some of the clay characters and some of the items that they would have used to draw characters. Like they have a little Pinocchio from the mid 1900s when they made Pinocchio. They have a marionette so they could see how it would have moved as a doll, and they could look at it so they knew how to draw it when they were drawing the cartoon. So
ooh. And they had Star Wars.
They do have a big section of Star Wars. They have a big Star Wars section, and they have a big an okay-sized Marvel section. And what did they? I think they had a Stormtrooper uniform.
Yes.
And we've got a few pictures that I'll put up, and I'm sure Nikki will send me a couple too. But they had a Star Wars. They had Luke's lightsaber. And they had a couple other things, but I don't exactly remember what they were in there. So
there was like a little one of the little porgs, like the bird. They had the BB-8 model.
Oh yeah, they did.
There was some cool things. They had something that Carrie Fisher wore. It was like earrings or a necklace or something. They had some pretty cool artifacts. It was good.
They do have some cool artifacts. It's relatively inexpensive too. I think it was like $25 a person to go through it. So it's not super
I don't know.
expensive.
I got free tickets from Aunt Cindy, so.
Also they and I know a lot of people aren't, they don't like the AI and using the AI and stuff like that. They did use AI at the beginning of this. If you watch the video at the beginning, they do have Walt come up to explain. They basically recreated Walt Disney to come up and explain what was happening. Or what the exhibit was. Walt died in the 60s while they were getting ready to build Walt Disney World. And he died of complications from lung cancer, which is understandable because he was a pretty heavy smoker. But it's a really interesting exhibit to see if you like Disney or you're interested by the history of a company like that or whatever, then it's really interesting to go see because there's a lot of artifacts. I would not recommend taking a kid. It's not really
meant for kids.
No, I saw some kids having fun with it and like looking at some of the stuff, but it's a lot of it's more like a museum exhibit. It's a lot of old it's a lot of old things.
I would say if your kid is
like 6 or 7 and up, it's like meant for maybe that, but not like toddlers like Disney World is. Yeah.
And another fact that I'll tell you that's interesting is I just told you that Walt died from cancer complications and from smoking. If you go to the Disney parks, you are going to be hard pressed to find a picture of Walt Disney with a cigarette in his hand. Now, because they airbrushed them all out. Almost every picture of him, if you look at it, you can see where he would have had the cigarette in his hand. But they airbrushed it out because they want it. I don't know. It is what it is. But if you go to
family friendly.
Yeah, if you talk to former cast members, they're taught not to point with one finger, because that's not appropriate. It's rude. You point with two fingers, because that's how Walt used to point, was like this. The reason he used to point like that is because there was a cigarette between his two fingers. So that's part of it. They won't tell you that part, but that's part of it. Is they want you, they're told to point with two fingers because it's not as rude, and that's partly because Walt used to point that way. But again, there used to be a cigarette between those two fingers.
Can you imagine like what he would have thought of everything nowadays? It would probably blow his mind of like how like Disney is now versus the 60s. Like obviously it was still massive, but just to think like he never saw Walt Disney World. He has never seen any of the modern Disney movies. Like it's just crazy to me to think about it that way.
Yeah. Walt was an innovator. There's two people in the Walt Disney Company that have been inducted into the Inventors Hall of Fame, and Walt Disney is one of them. And there is another guy that recently got inducted into that, and I can't remember his name for the life of me. But he recently got inducted into that Hall of Fame as well. Walt was an innovator. He came up with the idea for audio animatronics. He's one of the reasons we have surround sound today. Like he had the idea for that when Fantasia came out. And there's so many different things that he worked on, you know, that a lot of people thought was just bound to fail. Snow White was the first full-length animated feature. Everybody thought it would fail. It did wonderfully. Everybody thought Disneyland was a joke. They called it Walt's Folly. And obviously it's still going today. It was one of the first theme parks of its design at the time. So, you know, and now there's several castle parks that follow that idea around the world. So, but yeah, I enjoy the exhibit because obviously I'm a Disney nerd and a Disney adult, and you know, but I'm glad that you enjoyed it too. I'm glad that you got to go and see it. And it was good. It's always interesting to see stuff like that to me. We also did, my dad went with me to that, and we also did a couple other museums while we were in Kansas City. So,
nice.
And I always recommend that kind of stuff because it's just a lot of fun. Have you been to I'm going off topic now, but I forgot to ask you about this. Have you been to the Steamboat Arabia Museum in the River Market?
Yeah, a long time ago.
Okay.
But yes, I have. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, we went to that, which was fun, and then we also went to Truman's Library, which was updated within the last 5 or 6 years.
I haven't been since it's been updated.
Yeah, they did.
Because I probably went like 10 years ago.
We tried to go several years ago, and it was closed for renovations. But it's reopened now, so we went to that, and that was pretty cool to see too. So.
Yeah, it's a good museum for sure.
But I think, unless you have anything else, Nick, I think that's it for this week. Thank you everybody for watching. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment. You'll try to get you a shout out in the next episode. And we will talk to you guys next week.
Bye.